and regulatory frameworks for digital assets, having published more than 70 journal papers and several books, and has more than 30 patents to his name. If that wasn't enough, he's also involved in several startups around the MIT community. So I'll give the floor to Dr. Thomas Hardjono.
Okay, thank you, folks. So just first of all, the word standardization is not a sexy word, okay? You know, this is not like AI. AI is a cool word today, but this is a very relevant word for the future of tokenized assets. So these are recent news items. This is ongoing, probably noteworthy is the Goldman, announcement. For me, the biggest thing would be this year would be the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. I encourage you to read that. So, in summary, the Genius Act is a framework to recognize USD-based stablecoins operating in the United States. Okay, it's a very self-serving thing. This is fine. I was on a call with one of the ministers from Indonesia, and the first question he said, "This is just, United States trying to promote the greenback." And I said, "Yes, yeah, it's obvious." But besides that, what the Genius Act opens is the ability to think about frameworks for tokenizing non-currency assets. Okay, so for me, stablecoins, USDC, USDT, it's a done deal. Okay, we've got a template. Now figuring out, can we do digitize, dirham, digitize other kinds, but we have a template. The big deal now is, how do you think about this for tokenizing real estate, tokenizing bonds, tokenizing MMFs, right? So this is where the EU MiCA sort of provided a lead into this discussion, which is, they had two parts in MiCA, which is one is basically stable coins, EMT, electronic money tokens, and then secondly, they had a thing called ART, asset reference token. So this is a token on a blockchain that has a reference to something, but they don't say what this thing is, right? So I read that as being, the thing that it needs to point to is the evidence about the legal status of the asset, the history of the asset, and maybe even the issuer of the asset, right? So right now, this year, maybe because of due to the Genius Act, this year has been a strange year for me, because this is the first time in 10 years I see now the TradFi community being interested in blockchains, and the blockchain community is just, they've lost energy. I mean, literally, they barely want to answer the phone, And you say, well, what's happening? Well, maybe there's a change of heart in the sense that maybe finally we are indeed over the blockchain hype curve and over the trough of disillusionment, and now we are going through this, it's called the plateau of productivity, if you just look at that, and it is a painful, slow, uphill sort of battle, right? And this is, I think, where we are today. Very clear now, we have market fragmentation all over the place, right? So if you tokenize a bond on Ethereum, you tokenize it on, pick another blockchain, I'm trying to think of something that will support this. You might end up with two tokens that are not compatible and they're not legally recognized globally. So the aim is to have some kind of a standard to define the workflow of the issuance of the tokens that is globally acceptable, so that when you issue it in Abu Dhabi, you issue it in Singapore, it's comparable, right? So if you're the buyer, say, okay, that's great, I can buy both because I know I can always swap them because they're compatible. We're not there yet because of missing standards, technical standards. There's definitely incompatibilities between legacy and new systems, right? And then definitely legal incompatibility. So the legal frameworks, we may need a new sort of global level legal framework to allow these types of tokens to begin to flow, and maybe just pick something simple, something that's kind of boring, maybe the bonds. I guess everybody knows those things, right? And pretty much conceptually, everybody understands it, different parts of the world, or something like that. So this is a map of the ISP. So there is no such thing as a single internet. So the fact that we are able to do Zoom across the globe today is the fact that each of these service providers have a high degree of interoperability. So An internet service provider is the company you pay $40 to, at least in the United States, every month to get your cable connection and internet connection. So where I am in Boston, my region, it used to be called Media One, and they got acquired by Verizon, I believe. So I think I get a Verizon bill, right? So the point of this diagram is that these are distinct networks, physically separated. Even if you take two adjacent states, it's actually physically two different networks and two different businesses. And why this works is that you have technical standards to allow packets to go across these private networks at high speed. So imagine you change this to blockchains. Instead of reading Cox and Comcast, you read Ethereum. Pick what's the next coolest blockchain after Ethereum? Pick any blockchain you want. Solana, okay, he's a Solana fan right there. so just swap them and put them there, and you should demand that any token issued on Ethereum should be able to move across to Solana and vice versa. You as the investor, you don't care about blockchain technology. Just as you don't care who these guys are, if you're visiting San Francisco, you want connectivity to send email across to Boston and vice versa. You don't even know who these guys are. So you want to reach that state where if you buy a token in one blockchain, you want to move it, you should be able to do that without any issues, without any barriers. So a lot of challenges here. One of the things that, a bit of backing up. So our group at MIT, we've been looking at this interoperability problem since 2018, I guess. Our first IEEE transactions paper was 2018. We've been pushing forward. For the past 3 years, I've been, myself and another colleague, we've been having what we call a monthly discussion forum about interoperability. We invite every blockchain provider we've invited. They give a presentation and so on. And we're running out of them, okay? so 2.5 years later, Swift began attending a year ago. They sat quietly in the back of the Zoom call. Occasionally they'll clarify. Some guy would make some silly statement about Swift, and Swift, no, that's not, Swift is not a, this or Swift is not that. But so what's interesting this year is that we got challenged. Okay, well, Thomas, what are you going to do next? What is it that you're going to build? And so we thought, well, maybe this is the time to bring together these companies into a new SDO. And I'll talk about it. SDO is a standards defining organization that will be a neutral body so that competing companies, competing communities like Ethereum and Solana can get together. Right? If I talk to the Ethereum guys, they say, well, just go to the EEN. I said, no, the Solana guys don't want to go to your Ethereum meeting, and vice versa, right? You have to have a neutral forum, right? So this is what we are trying to set up, this year and next year. So a lot of problems. So actually, what was this for? So this is data models, right? So let me talk about. So a data model is a computer-readable description of an asset class that's standardized. It's just a description. So you take your PDF, take your piece of paper, transcribe it into something like JSON, because what JSON is, right, and standardize that, and make that your default thing. Why is that? That becomes an important template for other players in your same market or sub-market to use the same template, right? Pretty straightforward. Now, I looked around, there isn't one. The only one I found were these guys in Finos. So Finos is a group under the Linux Foundation that had been developing this common domain model to describe, particularly bonds in this language. And the purpose of this computer-readable file is then to feed your smart contract to produce the token. Okay, so but you need this. And the legal people need this because the lawyers in these companies are going to say, well, what exactly are we minting on the blockchain? And you produce the blockchain, record. They don't know how to read the entry on a ledger. But if you present them with the paper version of the description, a CDM version of the same thing, identical, right? They say, okay, yeah, this is just the same thing. You guys are not doing anything different. So this is definitely, very much required. We're in conversation with the tokenization working group over there, try to understand what they're trying to do and help them because, part of the role of MIT is actually to mediate and connect people. We don't have a product, we don't have a blockchain. Our product are grad students that we would like to push out the door as quick as possible. They want to do papers as quick as possible. So we think MIT would be a good venue, a good sort of player to bring these competing parties together. So I'm going to skip this, bit of a repetition there. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of that CDM data. So let's go backwards. So this is, you've got a token on Ethereum, great. Okay, so it's got these fields, it's got a URL there. What is the URL pointing to? We don't know. There's no standard to describe that. At the same blockchain, you need some kind of a metadata to describe the smart contract. Why? Because smart contracts cannot call out. They're a pretty dumb piece of code. They can't actually call out to a server out there and say, give me a file. So you need an assistant. So these two pieces go together on the blockchain. So this is not a difficulty. So if you're trying to tokenize a bond, this is all your bonds are. Yeah. What's missing is this standard, what we've been calling general digital asset record. This thing does not exist. Right? And this is one of the missing pieces for the ecosystem to run. So the question is, who should be working on standardizing this? So oddly enough, I said this year, it's really the TradFi people who are beginning to think, you know what, maybe we should look at ledgers and blockchains, but not to replace our infrastructure with blockchains, but to do a hybrid thing. So a keyword, when I talk to I could say the crypto boys politely, you guys know who I have to say, look, when you talk to people in the bond market and so on, they have a mental model of a workflow of how to do processing, to do settlement. And in that workflow, I have to use baby words, there are bus stops, there are checkpoints, okay, kids? Right, so these are the checkpoints where you do legal checking and so on. They have to record some data for reporting and so on and so on. So the question to the blockchain community is, what part of that could be extended into the blockchain without replacing the importance of those bus stops? Right, that's the kind of literally the baby words have to use, right? And so that's where we are today. And so the message for the blockchain community is that blockchain is not a commodity. I was at Swift, Sybos 2 weeks ago. We had a whole day there, basically supported by Swift, where we got a bunch of people together from various communities, and it's very clear that the people who are missing in this dialogue is the CSDs. So the Euroclears, Clearstream, DTCC, those guys need to be leading the discussion, right? So we met a whole bunch of people there. I'm going to skip this because this is you'll hear about you guys know what LEIs are, legal entity identifier from Glyph. There's an effort to produce a verifiable LEI structure that's quite promising, but that's another presentation. It's like 10 slides. So this is where we are as of 3 weeks ago. This is the meeting we had at Sybos. And so the idea would be to create vendor neutral specifications. So that previous map you saw of all the ISPs, right? That internet, this is the internet that was produced in the Internet Engineering Task Force over the last 40 years. So IETF is a group of volunteers, open to anyone, all the specifications are public. When you contribute anything in terms of joining the mailing list and so on, you have to agree on the IPR, so you can't just steal ideas from the public mailing list. But the result of this community is that you have the internet. That's why we can do Zoom today. And people take it for granted, but it does take a long time. I did a search last week, the number of specs in the IETF today. It's over 8,400 specifications. That's a lot of specs, covering anything from routing to your web browser, to your SSL, to your keys. They're working on a post-quantum algorithm with NIST, right? So this is a very active community. We have a secure assets transfer working group in the IETF that's trying to define a very simple unidirectional, single directional transfer of a token from one blockchain to another, regardless of private, public, with certain guarantees. That's almost done, but it's only a piece. And so that model, I think, works for this organization, and these are just a bunch of guys there that we met. But I think we need a model where we have like 7, 8, what I would call systemic players in the industry to sit down. MIT has done this before. Part of my first engagement at MIT was trying to get Microsoft, Google, and Apple sitting politely at the table. Okay, it took like 8 months, 9 months to arrange that meeting, but soon enough they saw that in fact there was more benefit down the road to collaborate today on fundamental, what I would call infrastructure building blocks that really doesn't gain you much advantage. You standardize it quickly, make sure it's efficient, make sure the specs can be updated as you go along, that the specs are going to be around 40 years, 50 years, and then move up the stack to where value is, right? So the internet, the people who are making money in the internet today is not your Comcast, it's Netflix, right? Look at all the Netflix now. Just imagine without the internet, you would not have ChatGPT. You wouldn't have access to ChatGPT, right? So we want to get to that space. And so this is the direction. I think we'll see if these guys bite. Again, we hope to get the CSDs involved. And I'm going to stop there so that I'm between us and my espresso. So so I want to stop here and probably open up to the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hardjono.
Yeah. So my question is, as we were talking about digital currency implementing into quantum technology, what do you think is the demand like ongoing? Will people start using quantum technology in Bitcoin mining in cryptos, or will the demand decrease over time as people are still not convinced?
That's a very good question. Maybe you should ask. Why don't you answer that one, Aleski?
So I think what needs to happen is transitioning from elliptic curve cryptography, currently used by probably all blockchains.
Yes.
Maybe not 100%, but close to 100% sits on elliptic curve cryptography, which is vulnerable to quantum attack, similar to RSA. NIST standard suggests moving to lattice-based cryptography.
Right. Let's just say they're struggling. This is a very complex problem.
Yeah. So a naive solution or simple high-level solution would be to change protocol and move from elliptic curve to lattice model-based cryptography. However, it would require a hard split in all blockchains. And it means that there would be old Bitcoin and new Bitcoin, and old Bitcoin will become worthless at some point. So the impact will be slightly unpredictable, also highly interesting to observe from outside.
So to answer your question, we need a stronger solution for non-currency. Like if you're recording a token bond, you want that to be safe. I know people are focused on Bitcoin because that's probably the hottest thing, but it's the boring stuff in life that runs the economy, right? So yeah.
Hi, just to add what you mentioned about cryptography. So is that in relation to quantum key distribution, and also the gap between quantum as a service is now shortening because there is applicators that are actually bridging that gap currently as quantum as a service. And the beauty about quantum key distribution is, in my humble opinion, currently climate change and cybersecurity is on par with the two biggest threats to humanity right now. So in your opinion, in relation to the quantum key distribution and cryptography, in relation, because my area of interest is the infrastructure, it all requires single mode fiber. So the transition of copper to fiber has never been more prevalent than today.
Yeah, I would even say Another thing about the internet that people overlooked is the fact that initially the coast-to-coast communications in the early days was over copper, internet over copper.
Yep.
And they said, well, why don't we use fiber? And so now all your undersea cable business industry is all fiber.
So submarine cabling.
Right, so nobody back in 1995, nobody could imagine that suddenly you have a new industry of people laying cables, on the ocean floor. And I would attribute that this is one of the side effects of internet technology, standardized internet technology, and that's what I'm arguing here. Standardized tokens, let's get over, with it, standardized, because you're missing out on these other adjacent industries that, like quantum, that will not fly until you can standardize and just make everything clear and straightforward.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that kind of.
Yes, you did. Yes, because the physical layer of the internet.
That's
Yep.
right. That's right.
Thank you.
You had a question.
Yeah, in terms of your interesting about TradFi and DeFi interoperating, what's your view on the UAE and Dubai linking
Right.
real estate to the digital ledger with
Sure. So I've been trying to convince the Audio Lab people. It's like, you guys need to be leading this discussion. This region needs to be leading the whole, just discussion, exploration about standards, right? Like, don't wait for other countries is my message. So yeah, I think if Audio Lab could begin contemplating, well, get together, just all the relevant financial, FMIs in the UAE in one room and say, hey, this is what we want. This is the standard we want. As one voice, you might get better results than this current fragmentation I'm seeing in Europe and definitely in the United States. But I think that's, that's where you guys can come in and say this.
Thank you, Hamdan. Thanks for the presentation, very interesting. This might be a stupid question, but wouldn't the point of a digital ledger be that we wouldn't need the DTCC as an like it's a clearinghouse?
That is a very sensitive topic. So it's very clear that, so the question, let me reverse the question. What part of the DTCC workflow could be put on a blockchain without killing DTCC?
So if we're looking at, let's say we're going to use mortgage-backed securities and going to put those on the chain, the risk is that the physical asset or the issuance doesn't line up with the digital, so you need some form of clearinghouse in between. But if you do it with like a vault contract or some other middleware layer, then what is the DTCC doing other than collecting fees?
Right. Well, you need a human being and some portion of the workflow to say, yes, click, yes, I approve this. I will take on legal liability if I make a mistake. Right. So in other words, it's almost like you can think of the CSDs having a very skeleton team of people with a whole range of computing infrastructure, but a person has to decide. Right. Somebody is accountable, maybe it's a registered professional of some kind. I see the human still being part of the workflow. It's just some of the more cumbersome things could be replaced by AI, translating documents to digital, but humans will always be needed because, and this is part of the difficulty in explaining to the crypto boys, a lot of the legal frameworks in certain industries like the bond market is based on human relationships. I know you know me, we've been in the industry together 20 years.
I don't know, I would disagree. I'm not, trading with someone at JP Morgan because I like the guy. I'm doing it because he certifies that JP Morgan has the assets. And if the chain can certify that JP Morgan has the assets, then I don't need the guy.
The problem is the chain is operated by a whole bunch of entities who will not be accountable. The node operators, they're not going to be wanting to be liable. The people who author the smart contracts, they don't want to take on liability. So who's taking on liability?
But then why do we need the smart contracts then?
That's a good question. I asked that myself. I asked the crypto kids, like, why do we need blockchains, right? And this is why I'm saying there's a hybrid process where some portion of the CSD function could be put on a blockchain for increase of efficiency or not. Right? It could be that, you know what, we just need faster databases. We don't need blockchain. We just need 6 databases that are synced together at millisecond speed and we're done. And the JPMC, multi-market tokenized MMF, it's on a private blockchain. Okay, so I don't know what it is behind it. Maybe it's a database. I mean, if I were them, I'd be doing a database. I'd be calling up Oracle. Give me your fastest, decentralized distributed database. I need 6 of them, spread throughout the United States, and done. Yeah, this is a big question for the blockchain community.
Thank you.
You're trying to do all of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then today you've got Circle announcing Arc One.
Yes.
Probably 100 of the most powerful companies.
Yes.
Financial services,
Yes.
technology, everyone
Yeah.
involved. Do you not risk them kind of going in?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they want to produce written standards, good on them. Right? We want something that's going to last 40 years, 50 years, the way the internet has lasted 40 years, 50 years. Now, don't get me wrong. In the early days of the internet, there were companies, I won't name names, who said, you know what? We'll just get the guarantee from the US government that we'll make all the routers. We'll be the sole single provider of routers. Okay, that temptation always exists. AOL, remember those guys. But you're not going to last 50 years. And if you're talking to companies like Swift, they want something that's going to last 50 years. After the current leadership literally died off, it needs to still be around, right? And so I don't know, is the Circle Arc One going to be around in 50 years? And I'm always asking these guys, write the specification down on a piece of paper, right? Not the GitHub, not code. Code is not standard, okay? Your GitHub, your code on GitHub is just some engineer's version of implementation. So the ITF, by the rule in the ITF is for every technical specifications, the authors have to find 2 implementations of the spec. One should be open source, well, both should be open source by different groups, but one definitely has to be open source. The other one could be a private, vendor implementation. So we need to get to that state. So there is precedent. This is trying to convince, these guys. I know the Circle guys want to move fast, but there comes a point when, first to market may not, result in the best solution.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hardjono.
That's-
And thanks to all of the speakers for their valuable insights.
Now we can get our coffees and espressos.
Exactly. This concludes the session. Please join us for coffee and networking. And let's reconvene at 3:25 p.m. in the main room for the awards ceremony.